This latest chapter of Black Clover did not pull any punches when it came to action. We had one of, if not the, coolest combination of magic the series has ever seen before, and from two of its absolute coolest characters, the unleashing of Devil King LUCIFERO's full power, and the return of ASTA and Yuno to the fight. Previously, Captain Yami, who was in critical condition, would be tended to by Gray, who'd managed to heal him. However, in the process of doing so, she would come to a rather alarming revelation. First of all, despite being in such a horrible physical state, Yami's body was teeming with magical power. It was excessive even for him, and I suppose you could call that the good news. The bad, or at least concerning news, is that the very composition of Yami's body has changed, as currently it is incredibly similar to that of Asta's devil, Libe. What we may for now presume to be thanks to the insidious dabblings of the late Diamond Kingdom scientist, Morris. And this to me opens up a whole new world of options for Yami in regards to the progression of his power. Ultimately, humans for the most part have their limitations. Their power can only go so far because their bodies are only capable of handling so much. It's the very same case that we saw with Mereo Leona not too long ago. As powerful as she may be, once she comes too close to mana itself, her human body will betray her and bar her from going to that next level. Yami, on the other hand, now with the body of a devil, should in theory have no such difficulty. In fact, with this inherent boost to his magic, he should already be stronger than ever before. Now, thanks to his dark magic spell, Black Moon, he was able to counter the gravitational pressure of LUCIFERO enough for him and those around him to move with less strain. However, the group would be met by another group consisting of Langris, Patoli, and an especially injured William. Patoli feeling the weight of his sins on account of the elf invasion arc, wished he could assist in this current fight, but since he had lost his grimoire, he'd likely be useless to them. At which point William would do what he could by offering Yami a new sword in the stead of the one he had given Asta, a blade known as Mistelten, named after a legendary sword of Icelandic lore, which was used to kill Balder, the son of Odin and brother to Thor, and had now been forged by way of William's world tree creation magic, the very last of his magical power. Now, I have to wonder about William at this point as well, because if Yami was altered to be more like a devil, who's to say that the very same is not also the case for William as well? But with this sword, Yami would resist LUCIFERO's attack, protecting Vice Captain Not. And LUCIFERO would take note that Yami was a user of dark magic, thus causing him to consider him a priority threat as well, but one he would face after killing Asta. And as such, he would up the gravitational pressure of his fist and send Yami flying. However, the next bunch to intercept the Devilish Royal's onslaught would be Zora, Sekre, and Rogue. These three weren't so much of an attacking force as they were a stalling one. They'd only be able to do so for half a minute, but they intended to keep LUCIFERO in place for just a little while by way of their combined mana method sealing magic and secret counter trap magic. In the meanwhile, Not would tell Yami to leave him be as he disregarded his own life. He felt an incredible sense of guilt in knowing that because of him, Yami lost Morgan too. He didn't want anyone dying on behalf of someone like himself, especially not his best friend Yami. However, Yami would tell and essentially command Not, saying that he was going to continue living and help enough people in his brother Morgan's stead too. Yami refused to back down as he didn't need a reason to save a friend, as the words of Morgan would come to mind for both of them in regards to their insane magical and personality-based synergy. Sentiments which would bring Not to tears as he would remark about how childish Yami was, as he too was now prepared to not only fight, but also to live, as the two now stood tall together, reunited just like old times. With this latest chapter, we made our way back to Zora and the others holding LUCIFERO off, and wow, was this an intricate looking combination move. Zora would then focus all the power he had received and was prepared to send it back to the devil twofold. However, how this actually ended up going was nothing like what Zora expected. For LUCIFERO, this was just a glorified fist bump, but it was clearly a struggle for Zora, which just goes to show just how little effort the King of Devils has been putting into all of this. That fist, if taken directly, would be lethal to just about any one of our magical knights, and even then, 2 times that power meant nothing to LUCIFERO, as he was able to not only match, but exceed it with ease. These are essentially the pillow punches of an aggressive toddler against the fist of a grown man. However, these guys were more than fulfilling their purpose in stalling LUCIFERO, as Noct and Yami would re-enter the fray, and here we can see a pretty interesting combination between their dark and shadow magic off the bat. Yami would then bring up the Black Bulls being such an interesting group, which Noct could not deny at all. They'd all gone above and beyond, defying all expectations. If you remember, when preparing to go into the Spade Kingdom, Noct pretty much disregarded most of them, but in this conflict, they managed to do so much. Zoro would then encourage these two to show off, as after all, they were their superiors, so it was only fair. Not to mention, Sekre would be polite to Noct, saying hello to her fellow goth comrade for the very first time. And so yeah, if the Black Bulls had progressed this greatly, surely the captain and vice captain should be able to display why they are who they are. And it would be at this point that Yami too would notice the excess amount of magical power he now possessed, despite not knowing exactly why. With that being said, Noct's power was somewhat exhausted given the prior attacks of Lucifero, which took out Slotos, his defensive power, leaving Gimodelo damaged but capable of proceeding regardless. Now the mask of Slotos here is destroyed, and I'm not sure if that means the devil is just gone or he is going to be able to reform later on if he's recovering, I don't know. But it would be pretty horrible if he were just gone forever. That would be a major nerf, and so I'm more inclined to believe that he is just down for now and is going to recover later on. But beyond this, we would then receive Mana Zone Full Release, Dark Magic and Shadow Magic Children's Playground, which seemed to play off of how childish they both can be at times and the fact that they are in fact childhood friends. A spell which would cause a vast cityscape to take form as several shadowy copies of the two would assault the devil from all angles. This was incredibly cool and incredibly powerful. The power of darkness would spread the shadows, and the shadows would create darkness. It was a perfect loop. And Noct all the while was using a new Devil Union mode combination, this time between Canis and Felis, which sounds about right. We're talking about canines and felines, a combination of his greatest attack form and his greatest speed form, meaning that they were purely on the offense here. Yami then took his new blade and slashed at Lucifero, and from this, Adramelech or Addy would notice something. Lucifero had suddenly stopped. He inspected his arm and saw his own blood. What was most definitely a minor wound, but for an entity as powerful as himself, this was groundbreaking. At first, the fiend shook with frustration. Then he settled into a horribly settling calm. His face was now far less wrinkled and his hands were extended. He would admit that these humans before him have the potential to defeat him, which is why he would be sure to slaughter them all. And not just them either. He'd do the very same to their parents, their siblings, their friends, and their neighbors. Without even an ounce of remorse, he would slaughter all of humanity, furthermore promising not to hold back from this point onwards, which is just about the most horrifying thing ever, as he'd actually been such a menace as is. For him to now take things even further is just ridiculous. Meanwhile, Nero had successfully sealed Asta's pain, from which point he and Yuno would rise up once more, both in terrible shape mind you, but more than willing to fight. From there we would have Yami and Noct, Asta and Yuno versus the newly transformed Lucifero in a fight to the death. And as we've said before, Asta can pierce Lucifero, he just can't land a hit. Put him together with Yuno, who can land several hits but just can't cut the guy, and you've got a winning strategy. Now on top of that, you've got Yami, who can cut Lucifero, and Noct, who can aid in his movement and traversal. They most definitely have a shot of winning here, but we'll just have to wait and see how far they manage to go. All the while, Lucifero wasn't really using any spells, so I am very curious to see what he may have in store for us. But to be here for all that and more, be sure to subscribe to Plot Armor with notifications on. We also have our new Western comic channel, Plot Armor Comics, which you can check out for even more in-depth content from us. But when it comes to bringing you some of the best Black Clover content on the platform, Plot Armor has you covered. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.